Okay, guys, we're going to wait another minute or so. As always, joining you from the secret undisclosed Batcave location of my 6-year-old, uh, also known as the only quiet place in the house. Somehow, don't know how. If it was about 20 degrees warmer, I'd do it outside. But yeah. Tonight we're going to talk about DBQ skills. So we're going to kind of do it in like game type of deal too, if we can. I need you to get your amps go, guys. So go run down the hallway. Don't run with your Chromebook. Come on, that's school property, right? And tonight, to get your extra credit, I need you to answer a question. Ha ha ha. Switching things up on you. I will also take questions tonight, by the way. So from what I've heard so far, it seems like the practice upload for the AP exam has gone well. If you haven't sent me an email, remember that's an assignment, and all you have to do is say, "Hey, Mr. Ash, I did the practice upload. Tell me, were you able to do it? Did it go well? Was there a problem?" And you get a grade for it. I mean, I can't give you an easier deal than that. So if you haven't done that yet, and I'm looking here at who's signed in on the comments. I think I'm preaching to the choir because off the top of my melon, most, if not everybody here so far has done it. But also spread the word if you know one of your friends has it, because I know I haven't had everybody do it yet. And this is really important, guys, because remember, you need to do it. You also need to make sure you do it on the device that you're actually going to take the test on, because otherwise it's a pointless test. And if it doesn't work, you got to tell me. You got to tell Mrs. Killens. We got to get you to the tech department, because if you can't do the practice upload, we're going to have a problem on test day. Also, again, if you have Grammarly, remember you need to disable that plugin. Please do not send me emails asking me how to do that. You guys know me in computers. Okay? I'm just the guy rocking the quarantine beard. Hope you went outside today. It was cold, but at least it was sunny. I know the weather's supposed to get cruddy. I went out this morning, probably when you guys were all still asleep, do a big old pork shoulder on there to barbecue. So that was my excuse. I graded a couple essays, go out, check the temperature. I just got punked by my 6-year-old. Okay. All right. So just a quick rundown. Tomorrow, if you're interested, and guys, it's voluntary, but I'll offer it to you forever and a day. 10 a.m. tomorrow, there's a Zoom meeting, a little bit more DBQ help. Thursday night, 7 o'clock, we'll do another YouTuber. And I might do a Zoom on Friday. Friday, you're going to do a Test Wizard DBQ. You guys know how to do that. And then next week, just so y'all know, there won't be anything due next week. I will post different review things up next week, and I will offer like way more Zoom meetings too, so you can pick and choose. And what I'll do is I'll send out a schedule, and I'll just say, hey, like here's a Zoom meeting about this topic, or a Zoom meeting about that, and let you guys pick and choose what you want to do. No pressure. And that's the deal. Thursday night next week, there won't be anything. I'll definitely do Tuesday. Maybe I'll do one more, or Tuesday night, maybe one more night. But Thursday night, this is the advice I always gave my kids since I started teaching AP. Night before the test, you need to just get away. Night before the test, see if you can con mom or dad into either buying, hey, support your local restaurant, right? Either buying your favorite dinner or making your favorite dinner. Watch your favorite movie or TV show. And, when you go to sleep Thursday night, put on your favorite music, your favorite song. So for me, either Thursday, I'll either barbecue something. I'd like to get Chinese food. That was always my tradition the night before the AP test. That's hard to find Chinese places that are open. And then I'll watch, let's see, either Thor Ragnarok or one of the Godzilla movies, because, and little Nirvana Unplugged. All right, so we're going to do our essay skills here tonight. And again, I'll take questions as well. I need to, when I ask you a question, I need an answer. So type that sucker in the comments, okay? All right. So first things first. Get your AMSCO, turn to page 400 in AMSCO. You'll see a DBQ there, guys. I want to clear up a couple things, some stuff I noticed. I'm cranking on those slavery essays that you guys did. Block 1, all of your essays are done. Block 3, I'm getting there. Okay. Um, Hopefully I'll be able to rip off a big chunk of those like I did today. Okay. All right. So if you are on page 400 in AMSCO, do me a favor, just type a yes on the comments for me. And I'll wait to see you do that. When I see a bunch of yeses, then I'll start. Okay, I got 3 yeses. Can I get a 4th? I got 4. Can I get 5? All right. So again, you have 45 minutes, guys. You have a total of 50. And Jake asked this question: can I still type when that 5-minute clock goes up? The answer I gave Jake was yes, but you're playing with fire. Remember, when that 50 minutes, that 50 minutes is up, if you have not uploaded, there's nothing I can do for you. And that I ran out of time is not a reason that you can use to justify getting the makeup test. So what I'll say is when that 45 minutes is up, you need a minute to finish up your sentence. Yeah, fine. But don't take chances and don't be the kid who's trying to hit the submit button with less than a minute left. Okay. All right. So what I want you to do is we have to make sure. One thing a couple kids have told me is they're still having a hard time because they're so used to the hour DBQ, the fact that it gives you more time to plan, and they're having a hard time getting into their essay. So I'm going to time you. And I need you guys to, when I say go, just do the essay question itself on page 400 right in that AMSCO book. Now, you are allowed to print out the essay prompt if you want. You're totally allowed to. Be careful if you do that, only because, you're waiting on that printer. It's going to take you time. Okay? So when I say go, 1 minute on the clock, I want you to read that essay prompt, underline or circle the keywords that you think are the parameters that you need to write this essay. Just so you know, this is legit. I'm not making it up. You had a minute. Ready? Go. All right. Time's up. So, for those of you guys who just joined us, we're on page 400 in AMSCO, and we're learning how to pick apart a DBQ. And what I need right now, again, I need answers tonight for you to get your extra credit. So, real quick, I just need keywords or phrases that you circled or underlined in AMSCO on page 400 for that essay prompt. If you could do that now for me, type that sucker in. What's a keyword or words or phrase or something that you would circle or underline for that essay? I'm seeing a couple things. Give me some more, peeps. Come on. Okay, a lot of terms there. Good job. All right, so I'm going to read it out loud, and then again, just let it sink in for you. Some historians have characterized the industrial and business leaders of the 1865 to 1900 period as, quote, robber barons, who used extreme methods to control and concentrate wealth and power. To what extent is that characterization justified based on the historical evidence? All right, I always lock in on time periods. So 1865 to 1900, which almost lines up perfectly with period 6, um, which is 1865 to 1898. But that term is important, that time period, okay, because we know that in 1865 the Civil War ended, and we know 1900 was when some guy named Teddy Roosevelt got elected to the vice presidency. Um, I see the term robber barons, especially when they quote a word like that. You know it's important. Um, Extreme methods you could do: control, concentrate wealth and power. Okay, so now you're being asked to justify to what extent is this characterization based on historical evidence. All right, so now here's my question for you. What kind of skill do you see for this essay? Because when I write my thesis, and of course, I'm writing my thesis based off the evidence I'm going to present, what kind of an essay, what kind of historical thinking skill do you think you can have besides supporting something with evidence? Type for me what you're thinking. Are we thinking CCOT? Are we thinking comparison? Are we thinking causation? So hit that for me, please. Type that sucker in. Okay, I got something from Bennett. Come on, peeps. Okay. I'm seeing a lot of causation. So now my question is, why do you say causation? Or is that because Bennett went first and we all figured it was safe that we just copy Bennett? Uh, Gianna says causation as well. Thank you, Helena. Okay. So we could say, okay, what factors caused them to be called robber barons, I guess? Sure, we could do that. If we do it as a causation thing, again, we're going to have to say, okay, they are robber barons because of this, because of that, because their actions did this, their actions did that. But we also have to have our counterclaim. So we have to also, in some way, shape, or form, argue that maybe they weren't robber barons, but maybe they were just guys who like had better ideas or better practices. All right. Do you remember from back, you know, right after Christmas break, what we call what the other term for these guys? Robber barons was the negative term. What's the positive term for the fact that they're pioneers, they're innovators? I'm going to wait a second or two. Let me see if anybody can get it. Try take a guess. Wolfpack, good job. Captains of industry. Okay. So now, if I'm thinking about my essay here, all right, I've got my time span, 1865 to 1900. And again, I strongly advise in some way, shape, or form, even if you just have the back of a Tully's napkin, okay, something, sketch out your time period so you have your parameters. We're looking for evidence that they were robber barons. We're looking for evidence that they were captains of industry. Okay. And, they say methods to control and concentrate wealth and power. So something about their methods for control and something about wealth and power. Okay. Now, think in your melon for a second. First impressions. Before you look at the documents, where do I think I would want to, weigh my thesis more? Remember, my thesis should be like, about 70-30. How many of you guys are thinking you would go more? Okay, they deserve the title robber barons because blah, 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 blah. How many of you are thinking, although their actions did constitute the idea of a robber baron in some regards, in reality, they were more, quote, captains of industry because how many of you guys are leaning towards captains? How many of you guys are leaning towards robber barons? Just Tell me that. One or two more peeps. Come on. All right. So now, part of my thesis, and this is what was missing from some of you guys. Some of you guys had a really good idea for a thesis when you wrote that slavery DBQ, but you were missing something. That because statement. Okay? You can tell me that although people like John D. Rockefeller, JP Morgan, did commit certain acts that earned them the nickname robber barons, in reality, they were more captains of industry because you need such as. So, like, let's say I'm going to take the robber baron's tilt. I'm going to say, although business leaders like Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller did make positive contributions to American society and America's economy, such as, okay, in reality, their actions warranted the nickname robber barons because, give me that, okay, guys? All right. So hit that for me, please. Think about your because idea. And what I'd like you to do is, for robber barons, whether you're going to tag the word such as, or whether you're going to say because, or for instance, or for example, can you guys give me a word or two that fits with that idea and would help build that idea that they're robber barons? So if you're going to take the idea that they're robber barons, because, such as, for example, for instance, and give me that line. Okay. Faith, they created trusts. Now understand, the creation of a trust isn't going to be bad so much as trust that did what? Matthew, social Darwinism. I don't know if you're going to ascribe the idea of social Darwinism to them, but we could certainly use that as a word that could build up how they try to justify their actions. Okay, Garrett, they eliminated competition. Sure. Anyone remember the term we use for Rockefeller? The fact that he wanted to control one certain part of an industry, one factor in the stages of production. Okay, Grace, good job. I like poor treatment of workers. Lily, putting others out of business. Good. Hey, anyone got that word for me? What's it called? It's really what a monopoly is. When you control one step in the production of a product. It's what Rockefeller did. Remember, Rockefeller only controlled oil refining. He didn't care about anything else. Faith, good job. Gian or Liv, good job. Horizontal integration. All right. Now let's say I've got to get the other part of my thesis, whether I'm taking the robber barons route or I'm taking their captains of industries route. My because, my such as, my for example, my for instance, what would be a word or something I could use to say, hey, these guys were pioneers, they're just better businessmen, or they're rich dudes who did good things. Can you give me one word? Come on. By the way, doing a really good job. Matt, good job. Philanthropy, love it. Maybe an example of a philanthropist. Type me an example of a philanthropist if you could. Thanks, Bennett. Good job, Matt. Rob coming in with that idea of the gospel of wealth. Okay, great. All right. So I think you get my point. Make sure your thesis has that because, that for instance, that such as. Remember, your thesis can be more than one sentence. Okay. The other thing is make sure with your context, some of you did so much context and then literally I had to go back and back and back and try to look and go, it's like your thesis got camouflaged. Okay. Remember, your thesis is the most important part of your essay. I've always liked to tell kids, someday you're going to meet the person of your dreams. Don't have a booger sticking out your nose. That first impression matters. All right. So now to contextualize, there's two ways we can get this point, remember. All right. And again, we don't want to go psychotic with this. We want to have like 3, 4 really good sentences that have vocab in them. We do not want to, take up like half a page on context. And you know who I'm talking to. There's 2 ways we can do this. We can do the Wayne's World treatment. Let's go back in time. Diddle-doo, diddle-doo, diddle-doo. And we can say, okay, walk it back. Here's how we got to this point. So here's how with the topic in this case of, business, corporations, the economy, here are some of the changes and the big trends that have developed in the previous time periods. But then you have to explain why they are relevant to your essay. That all of a sudden, hey, there's a titanic shift. There's a big change. Okay. Or that these other factors have caused this to happen. The other thing you can do is you can do the big zoom out thing and say, here, let's take a snapshot of what period 6 is like. What's going on? What are the big issues? What events kind of bookend period 6? Like, hey, it starts with this event. It ends with this event. What are other issues not related to the economy? Okay. Do me a favor, peeps. Can you give me, each of you, 1, maybe 2 words? I'm not even looking for a sentence of contextualization for me. Do that. You're making a very happy teacher who's sitting on his 6-year-old's bed on YouTube. Couple more words if you guys really wouldn't mind. Okay, so if we bookend the time period for period 6, we know what 1865 is the end of the Civil War. It's during Reconstruction. We know that this is the Gilded Age, which, by the way, is GILDED. Okay, we know it's the age of big business. It's America's second industrial revolution. We know it's the time of giant trusts and monopolies. We could also say it's the time when the Old West was kind of closed out. We talked about like the Transcontinental Railroad being built, Native Americans being forced onto reservations, the Battle of Wounded Knee. We know that 1898 is the end of period 6, where you have the Spanish-American War. We could talk about, lots of immigration in the United States during this time period. The whole idea is context means don't talk about these big business guys. So if your topic is, these guys, are they robber barons? Surround it with, okay, they're in a time period of industrialization, a time period when there's lots of immigrants coming in, the quote, new immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe, a time period when American cities are developing, urbanization, as Lily pointed out, okay? A time period that was in many ways started because of the economic effect of the Civil War. A time period that will end with the Spanish-American War, a perfect example of the control that these industries had because it was a war fought for imperialism with big business interests in mind. A time period that had, problems for workers. A time period that will have so many abuses, it will lead to a new time period, a new movement later on that we call the Progressive Era, designed to correct its abuses. All right. So let's look at docs for me. I'm going to put a timer on you guys, and what I need from you is I need two things. 1, I just need to know the main idea of the document. Now remember, on the day of the AP test, you got 5 docs, you got to use at least 4. One of those docs is going to be non-textual. It means it's going to be a picture, a cartoon, an image, a poster, something like that. Okay? If a doc gives you difficulty, then it's telling you, hey, that's not the one I want to use. All right, so give you a minute and a half here. Main idea and what part of hippos, what the historical context, intended audience, purpose, or point of view, what part of HIP would you use? Ready, set, go. Five more seconds, guys. All right, so main idea here. Vanderbilt is in it for the money. Vanderbilt's all about the Benjamins. Okay, so first things first, I always cheat. I always look at who the author is. I look for the time period of the doc because sometimes that gives me enough clues where if the text of the document itself is hard, I can kind of limp my way through it. So maybe I remember William H. Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's a robber baron in the railroad industry. He's a daddy's boy. His father was Cornelius Vanderbilt, who was the first real robber baron in American history. Vanderbilt's also famous because of the quote, "The public be damned." He was once asked, well, don't you feel like you have an obligation to help the public? And his quote again was, "The public be damned." So he's being interviewed by the Chicago Daily News. How is the freight and passenger pool working? Now, right away, that term pool, that's an important vocab word. The railroads used to get together, and I always kind of equated to that scene in The Godfather. I've called this meeting of the 5 families. Basically, we're not going to compete. So all the railroads in an area, they would pool. They would say, look, we agree to set the same rates. That way people will not be able to shop around and get a better deal. Vanderbilt, very satisfactorily. I don't like that expression pool. However, that's a common construction applied by the people to a combination which the leading roads have entered into to keep rates at a point where they will pay dividends to stockholders. The railroads are not run for the benefit of the quote, dear public. That cry is all nonsense. They are built by men who invest their money and expect to get a fair percentage on the same. Question: does your limited express pay? No, not a bit of it. We only run it because we are forced to do so by the action of the Pennsylvania Road. It doesn't pay expenses. We would abandon it if it was not for our competitor keeping its train on. But don't you run it for the public benefit? And there's that quote, "The public be damned." What does the public care for the railroads except to get as much out of them for as small consideration as possible? I don't take any stock in this silly nonsense about working for anybody's good but our own. So, main idea, it's his job to only worry about his stockholders. And if I'm looking at hippos, you guys have already answered for me. Yeah, this is the point of view. Now, talk to me. Let's do a little finish the sentence thing here. Clearly, this document is written from the point of view of a what? Fill that in for me. It's written from the point of view of a what? Thank you, Robert Barron. Good. And and now you can't just stop there. Some of you stop there. You got to say, look, Vanderbilt is justifying his actions for using pools as a way to restrict and or eliminate competition by saying it is not his job to look out for the public interest. It is his job to make as much money for his stockholders as he can. And you might add on to this because Vanderbilt represents a railroad trust. A trust is a corporation that controls an industry. You could talk about other effects of the railroads, how they would fix prices for farmers. That could be good outside information. Connect that to why the Granger laws were created. Okay? All right. Let's take a look. I don't want to go, incredibly slow here. Let's just do document 3. We're going to do document 3, and then we'll do one more document after that. So look at document 3. I'll give you a minute and a half. Main idea, what part of hippos, then we'll kill it, and we'll kind of do a goofy little YouTube game. Okay, guys? So document 3 of a minute and a half. Go. Okay. All right. So document 3 here. Can I get a main idea for doc 3, guys? So again, if I'm looking at this document, again, and this is me. Some of you guys may have your own styles, but I always feel like this is the best way to understand, especially when you have older documents where the language might be sufficiently strange for you. Source, Andrew Carnegie, right away. Ding, 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 alarm bells go off. I know who that author is. So now all of a sudden I know 2 things. One, point of view is going to be really important because he's somebody I really should know. Or 2, historical context because he's a dude who's famous, who's done stuff. And so maybe this explains why he did something, or you're going to be able to relate it to, the things going around at that time. This is from Wealth, which we talked about in class this year. The problem of our age is the proper administration of wealth, so that the ties of brotherhood may still bind together the rich and poor in harmony. The price which society pays for the law of competition, like the price it pays for cheap comforts and luxuries, is also great. But the advantages of this law are greater still, for it is to this law that we owe out wonderful material development which brings improved conditions. While the law may be sometimes hard for the individual, it is best for the race because it ensures the survival of the fittest in every department. We welcome, therefore, so right away we know something. We see that phrase, survival of the fittest, and you guys jumped all over this. Survival of the fittest. The big vocab word is what, who had it? Bennett pointed out. And if you get this time period, guys, you got to use this word. This is social Darwinism. Okay? Social Darwinism was the philosophy that, again, it's survival of the fittest, that government should not interfere, that it's natural for some to get rich while others are poor, for some companies to become huge while others get put out of business. We learned later on that social Darwinism was justification for imperialism. So we know right away he's going into, yeah, look, when you're going to make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs. So he's taking a justification for the actions of robber barons. He's saying, look, we know there's some negatives, but that's how you get the positives. We welcome, therefore, as the conditions to which we must accommodate ourselves, great inequality of environment, the concentration of business, industrial and commercial in the hands of a few, and the law of competition between these as not being only beneficial, but essential. So he's using social Darwinism to justify the tactics of robber barons for putting other company out of business. Now, if you remember Vanderbilt, this is where we can jump in with some outside information. So his point of view is he's a robber baron. He's justifying tactics to put competitors out. Vanderbilt, remember, used what we called vertical integration. And that's a real big difference to make. That's great outside information. It's a point you can drive home. Rockefeller was horizontal. Rockefeller believed that when you make a product, the key was to control one step in the making of that product. And for Rockefeller, it was refining oil. For Vanderbilt, the idea was, I can make steel, better and cheaper steel, by controlling all of the steps to make that steel. So, Vanderbilt, Carnegie. Carnegie controlled his own iron mines. After all, iron comes from steel. He had his own coke fields. Coke was a special type of coal that you needed to make steel. He had his own railroads to ship the coke, to ship the iron, because they're really heavy. He had his own mills, his own factories to make the steel, and then he had other factories to make products out of the steel. So for Carnegie, the idea of vertical integration, if you control all the steps in the making of a product, you can make that product better, you can make that product cheaper. Now, outside information, we could tag in there the idea that Carnegie also felt he had a duty to do something with it. This essay, Wealth, is also where he lays out the idea of philanthropy. The famous quote from Carnegie, the man who dies wealthy dies disgraced. Okay? All right. Do me a favor. Take a look at document 4. Same deal for me. 1 minute on the clock. Main idea. What part of hippos? And then we'll do a quick little kind of game of connections and stuff like that, and then we'll call it a night. Thirty more seconds, guys. And there's the timer. Okay. So we're looking at document 4. James B. Weaver. I'm going to say some AP kids will know him. He doesn't jump out in your face like Carnegie does. But again, James B. Weaver, he is the first ever presidential candidate for the Populist Party. And this is 1892 when Weaver ran. He got 1,000,000 electoral votes. Weaver largely gets overshadowed because in 1896 the populists nominated some guy named William Jennings Bryan who went all cross a gold speech. All right. I'm going to read this. Think about what part of hippos. It is clear that trusts are contrary to public policy and hence in conflict with the common law. They are monopolies organized to destroy competition and restrain trade. It is contended by those interested in trust that they tend to cheapen production and diminish the price of the article to the consumer. In other words, the argument of the robber barons is that they make, by having no competition, they make goods cheaper. Trusts are speculative in their purpose and formed to make money. Once they secure control of a given line of business, they are masters of the situation and can dictate to the two great classes which they deal: the producer of the raw material and the consumer and the finished product. They limit the price of the raw material so as to impoverish the producer. They drive him to a single market. They reduce the price of every class of labor. Now, I can go on and on and on here. The populists are mainly farmers. So if we're doing this sucker, we could look at historical context. Okay. We could talk about the circumstances that caused the populist party to be formed. We could talk about things that trusts have done to the farmers. We could mention specifically what trust railroads has hurt farmers the most. We could talk about government legislation that's been used to try to regulate the railroads, Granger laws, the Supreme Court cases of Munn versus Illinois, Wabash versus Illinois, how Wabash struck down the Granger laws, and that's what led to the creation of the ICC. We could also talk about the elections in 1892 and 1896. This document, a call to action, is calling for the regulation of trusts. So we could say, look, this is the point of view of a farmer, this is the point of view of a populist. If you know who James B. Weaver is, or if you can figure out what group he's a part of. Even if you can't, you could use purpose and say the purpose of this is to call for the regulation of trusts. But got to give me something specific. Now, 1892 is 2 years after the Sherman Antitrust Act. It's 5 years after the ICC is created. So you could maybe argue this author's saying more needs to be done. It's also just about a decade before some guy named Teddy Roosevelt and his square deal. And you might say, well, the cry here, the purpose that the author wanted will not effectively get addressed until the next decade when Teddy Roosevelt comes along with the square deal and breaks up trusts. Okay? All right. So here's what I want to do tonight. Just to kind of make something easy, we've got to get that little extra analytical point, the one that I like to call synthesis. Again, you want to have 3 to 4 sentences, guys. Okay? You can't do the drive-by one sentence dealy. But you give 3 or 4 sentences to explain a connection, you're going to be in good shape. So all I want you to do tonight is I'm going to say a word that somehow relates this DBQ, and I want you to go outside of period 6. Because remember, this essay is 1865 to 1900. Go outside the time period of the essay, like my hand gestures. Yeah. And give me 1 or 2 words. I'm not even asking you for sentences, guys. 1 or 2 words that you could make a connection to. Okay? If I made you explain the connection, you got to be able to do it. Okay? So, first things first, I will give you, let's do the Populist Party. Populists were a third party. Again, they ran presidential candidates a couple times. The big famous one was in 1896. They wanted the direct election of U.S. senators. They wanted an income tax. They wanted government to regulate trusts and monopolies. And they wanted the coinage of silver. Okay? Give me something from, and they're a third party. Remember our little brainwashings? We haven't done those together in a long time. But if I say third parties, you say new idea, split the vote. Give me a connection to the Populist Party from outside the time period. Give me one or two words, guys. Come on. Anything you can think of. So we said the populists are a third party. They had a bunch of reforms they wanted. Their famous candidate was a guy named William Jennings Bryan. Logan, good job. Go right to the Bull Moose Party, which is right in the next time period. It runs in 1912. Give me one or two other connections. Can you think of another political party, a third party that brought up new ideas and split the vote, maybe from before this time period of 1865 to 1900? No nothings. Bennett, I like it. Okay. Now, make sure you can explain why the connection is relevant, though, because remember, populists, they're reformers who want to regulate trusts and monopolies. If you're going to just say, hey, they're similar to know nothings, someone's going to look at you like, wait, what are you, nuts? You know, the know nothings are anti-immigration, but build your case if you're going to do that. Okay. Can you think of another third party, maybe one that had a more positive reform than we don't like immigrants? Right about the same time. Good job, Rob. The Free Soilers. Yeah, okay. All right. Let's do another one here. Let's talk about, well, I'm going to use document 6. If you look at document 6, it says Statement of Pullman Strikers, June 1894. Scan that thing over and give me something from outside the time period. So something that's not from 1865 to 1900. Because if you can make your synthesis connection directly to a document, now not only are you making a connection, but you're also showing, hey, I really get the document. So look at document 6, Statement of Pullman Strikers, June 1894, and make that connection for me. So again, you're looking at document 6 and you're trying to find me a one or two word connection to something outside the time period 1865 to 1900. Gonna wait a few more seconds. All right, so I'm going to read document 6 to you, see if that helps. This one's tough, and that's okay. I want to give you some tough ones. All right, so again, you have a statement from Pullman Strikers, June 1894. Pullman, both the man and the town, is an ulcer on the body politic. He owns the houses, the schoolhouses, and the churches of God in the town he gave his once humble name. The revenue he derives from these wages he pays out with one hand, the Pullman Palace Car Company. He takes back with the other, the Pullman Land Association. He's able to do this to bid under any contract car shop in this country. His competitors in business to meet this must reduce the wages of their men. This gives him the excuse to reduce hours to conform to the market. His business rivals must in turn scale down, so must be. And thus the merry war, the dance of skeletons bathed in human tears, goes on and will go on, brothers, forever, unless you, the American Railway Union, stop it. All right. So Bennett says this can connect to the coal miner strike in 1902, the anthracite coal strike, the one that Teddy Roosevelt negotiated an end to. You could. I'm looking at this as something far away from unions. So basically what they're saying is, here's George Pullman, the guy who makes the luxury railroad cars, who's saying, I'm paying you with the one hand, but then you have to pay me for the rent to live in the company town. You have to pay me to buy your food and your groceries and your supplies in the company stores. And I'll make sure that whatever I pay you and how much you're going to have to pay me at the end of the day, you're not really getting ahead. You're just there. Why? So I can be ruthless. I can keep my prices low. I can get rid of my competition. And I don't have to give you one drop more than I need to. Can you guys think of another system where the deal is you're going to work and you're going to have to pay enough back to me somehow that you're never, ever, ever going to get ahead? Now, technically, it's during this time period, but now, Bennett, technically, sharecropping is in the time period, right? Because it's a Reconstruction and New South thing. But it's so far different that that's a connection you can make. Because, again, the idea of sharecropping was African Americans would have to pay a rent or a share of their crops or a share of their profits. And it was always going to be so high that they could never get ahead. So you could absolutely use that. Okay? You could even make the connection kind of sort of to indentured servitude. Remember, the idea of indentured servitude was that a person could not afford to come to the New World, so they would sign this indenture, this contract for typically 4 to 7 years, and that they would have to work, and they didn't have a lot of rights, and by the end of their contract, they would be given their freedom, maybe some tools, maybe some tobacco, which was like money. But either way, the rich guys in Virginia, the ones who were paying for the indentured servants, they were always coming out ahead, and the indentured servants were always kind of lagging behind. And you could point out the conditions of these Pullman car workers led to the Pullman strike, in which Eugene Debs and the American Railway Union got involved. The government got involved on the side, shocker, of big business, because that's what they do. You could talk about how it led to Debs being thrown in jail when the Pullman cars were hooked up to railroad cars, and Debs and the American Railway Union refused to operate those cars. You could say, strikes would tend to become violent uprisings. You could mention that, hey, look, the unfair conditions of indentured servitude led to Bacon's Rebellion. Okay? All right. Look for me here. I want to find a good one. All right. Go to page 405. That's the other DBQ about this time period. Don't worry, we're not going to hippos the document. I'm just looking for a connection here. Look at document 3 on page 405. Look over that cartoon and tell me if when you look over this cartoon, you can think of another connection to another time period. Okay? Do that for me, please, guys. Okay, Logan Faith. I like the idea of Tammany Hall and political machines because we're seeing political corruption here. The bosses of the Senate. Remember, under the original Constitution, you did not get to vote for the U.S. senators. The U.S. senators were picked by state governments. It wasn't until the 17th Amendment was ratified, That's in the 19 teens during period 7 that changed. And because people could not vote directly on their U.S. senators, it meant we really didn't have much influence over the Senate. Instead, the Senate was really in the pocket of big business. I'm going to say you could go back to period 5, to pre-Civil War days, to make a connection. Can anyone jump that one for me? What connection could you make pre-Civil War days? And then we'll do one more thing and we're done for today. Can you think of one connection with this cartoon to something that's pre-Civil War? This cartoon called The Bosses of the Senate. Okay, Rob says the spoil system. I could see that maybe because now you're talking about, like, again, Jackson saying if you're a campaign supporter, if you work for my campaign, if you're a donor, you're going to get a government job. That could definitely be one, as long as you explain it, Rob. But there's another one. If I took that cartoon, The Boss of the Senate, and I redrew it, who in the 1840s, 1850s, who could I draw in as the new bosses of the Senate? Oh, heck, 1830s, 40s, 50s. Who could I argue as the new bosses of the Senate then? Take a shot at it, guys. Come on. All right, guys. So if it's the 1840s and 50s, could we say that maybe like Southern slave owners, Southern plantation owners were, quote, the bosses of the Senate? Remember, like, I'll give you an example. It's not in the Senate, but it's in the House of Representatives. In the 1830s, because the South was so outnumbered in terms of population, the House of Reps, which was controlled by the Democrats, and this is the time when Jackson was president, created what was called the gag rule that said you could not even discuss slavery in the House of Representatives. But you could also make the argument that, that really in many ways, Southerners dominated the Senate. The slave interest dominated there. You could make an argument for why we went to war with Mexico. You could make an argument for, the ideas of trying to push slavery westward. Okay? All right, one more synthesis connection. If you're going to talk about philanthropy during this time period, I hope to goodness gracious you do, because if you're talking about robber barons, you got to talk about what they do that's good. You got to talk about Andrew Carnegie. Again, the guy who wrote The Gospel of Wealth, the guy who famously gave away half of his fortune. Connect Andrew Carnegie as a philanthropist to somebody else. Do that, and I'm happier than a clam. We're done for tonight. Okay? All right, Rob, JP Morgan did some philanthropy, but he's in that same time period. I'm saying go outside the time period of 1865 to 1900 and give me somebody else, maybe somebody from modern times who's in the news a lot, gives away lots of money. You can't say Tony Stark, playboy billionaire philanthropist, doesn't work. Yeah, Bill Gates, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation gives away billions of dollars for all kinds of things. Try to see if you can give me some specific detail about it, though. Okay. Can you think of anybody else from outside the time period? You know, those of you guys, who are LeBron James fans, didn't he like start a school or something like that? You could probably even weasel that. All right. So tomorrow, 10, there'll be some DBQ help if you want. Thursday night, we're going to do a review on economic policy. I sent you guys 2 different Google slides because it's a big topic. Don't worry, we're not going to do both. Just look at the first one, which says economic policies and issues, periods 1 through 5. Okay. Guys, if you need my help with anything, please contact me. I miss you guys a ton. And remember, again, if you need anything, I'm here for you. If you haven't done the practice upload, please do that. Make sure you print out the checklist from College Board, and make sure that, you have your study guides that you've been making, printed and ready to go. And we'll be talking. Until then, log off and plug in your Chromies, homies.